Good morning.
It is.
I'd like some help in reducing resistance to myself being selfish.
Well, you've come to the wrong place. Because we encourage it.
No, you encourage to be selfish, and I have some trouble with doing that. So, long-standing.
You want to be more selfish.
Want to be more selfish.
Then
yes.
we'll help you.
Thank you. I thought that's why you picked me. So, long-standing history of being a people pleaser, and
which is the discussion we just had.
Yes, and I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing in of itself. However,
because pleasing people is good because
pleasing people is good because for I think there are a number of reasons. The least of which is not just you're here helping us; we're helping other people in return, and so I think that that's part of what makes the world go around.
So we agree that we are uplifters.
Yes.
And that it is pleasing to be uplifters to others.
I agree.
So what could possibly go wrong in the business of people pleasing? What could make it off?
For myself, I sometimes do it at the expense of, sometimes I allow people to become dependent on my helping them.
And then what happens if that, so what's the downside of that? In other words, because if you are tuned in and you have this infinite resources flowing through you and you're flooding it toward others, we don't see any downside there. So if there is a downside, what's the cause of it?
For myself, it'll throw me out of balance sometimes.
So it isn't the people pleasing that is out of balance. It is that something happened in the process that pinched off your resources.
That's better stated.
What could it have been? What could ever pinch off your resources that would deprive you of your ability to uplift others? You focused upon their need for your resources.
Right.
You focused upon their need and therefore deprived yourself of the alignment and the resources, and then in your deprivation of your own resources flowing through you, you blamed them.
Yes, I guess that is.
Well, that was pretty clear, wasn't it?
It was.
So, and it's an easy thing to do. In other words, so often, because your desire is to uplift others. And when you see a friend in need of something, it's really a little tricky to turn your attention away from their need and focus your attention upon their achieving of whatever it is that they want. And they're usually not very helpful because they have been training themselves for a very long time to believe that the more they display their need to you, the more likely you will be to help them.
Yes.
So it's not easy to stand strong and say, I'm not going to fill in your grid. It's not easy to stand strong and say, I know that you have the resources and I'm going to stand in the belief that you're going to find them, but I'm not going to be the creator of your reality. I'm just going to root for you being the creator of your own reality. When they're feeling weak and diminished, that's not what they want to hear. And so being the helpful, uplifting person that you are, you're always wanting to do everything that you can to uplift them and help them. But it is too big of a price to pay because you can't focus upon their need without depriving yourself of all of the energy that is your life force. So actually, this is a really good sales job we're doing on selfishness, because what we're actually saying to you is you must not let someone else's need be so significant in your mind that you deprive yourself of the very life force that you must have in order to be of any value to anyone. If you don't put that life force and your connection to it first, you have nothing to give them, you say.
Absolutely. In terms of, I've thought of this analogy in the past. In a medical crisis, if there was a big disaster and there was a doctor and he was there and he was saving people's lives, he's got to take a break. He's got to rest. He's got to take care of himself, or he's not going to be any good to anybody else. And I see that. But it's not always so obvious in situations, and a lot of times it's an emotional need from somebody, where somebody comes and then you get involved, and sometimes my desire to help them is more than their desire to help themselves.
Well, that often happens, but a big part of it is when they look at you and they see you stable, and they want part of your stability to enhance their experience. Often they don't realize that it is their comparison. In other words, if they're looking at your stability, there's no way you could get out of balance in that, because as they're looking at stability and wanting some of it, then they're fostering more stability and the resources are forthcoming. But what often goes wrong is that they see themselves as unstable in their request for your stability, and so the emphasis is on the wrong thing.
On the instability.
And here is the most significant conversation of the day, maybe ever, and it speaks right to the heart of what you're asking for. Whose grid's getting filled in? That's really what this question is. Whose grid is getting filled in? And we got to tell you, it's whatever grid is most active in the moment. And so if they're needy, and you're wanting to help, maybe even flowing into their neediness a little bit, you're leaning in the direction and you will come to resent it very soon. But if their neediness does not distract you from who you really know them to be, then your vibration will dominate and they will join you in the grid of their source, you see.
That was so significant, and it reminds me, I have 2 grandchildren. My grandson, who's coming up on 3, there are times when I witness his parents struggle with the challenges that a 2-year-old can bring into the household. And for some reason, I've never, even as a father, when my kids were young, I see children a little differently, and I never got caught up in that. And so,
how do you see them?
I guess I don't see. I see them as very free-spirited. So if they throw a tantrum, I don't see that as a problem. I look at the positive side of it, and I never got caught up in that. And I did a great job of that as a father, but as a grandfather, I think when you have years of experience and you watch and you say, okay, my kids turned out to be really good kids, and all the worry that I had as a father would have growing up about that was pointless, because none of that stuff happened. So as a grandfather, I can see this happen, and I've never allowed myself, when it comes to children, to get wrapped up into that, or to knock me out of balance.
You're speaking to exactly what we were talking about. In other words, you're able to see it without letting whatever grid that got going on upset your balance. And so, and they naturally come back to that, to the grid of well-being.
Yes.
It takes quite a bit of attention otherwise for something different from that to happen. The analogy that we've offered through the years about this very thing is, if you were walking along a mountain ledge, you had 2 friends with you, and you, for some reason, found yourself in an unstable situation. Maybe you hurt your foot, maybe you bumped your head, but you are not stable on your own. And you've got 2 friends with you, and one is preoccupied and unstable himself, limping along, barely able to make his way along the ledge, and another one is strong and sure-footed and clear-minded. Which one would you be glad was there?
No-brainer.
Of course it is. And yet, often, the very people who seek your help plead such a needy case that they suck you in. And then you can't help them. But your discord is not because you can't help them. It's that you've deprived yourself of who you really are.
Very well put.
So you can't, we're not worried about you ever being unselfish, because your tuning to the source within you is so significant that you will never deviate from it but a small bit before you will want to sit down and reclaim your balance and prepave something different for what's coming next.
Excellent.
It is.
Thank you so much.
Yes, indeed.